Before the video starts, if you want to support me personally, I posted this Winnie the Pooh illustration on my Redbubble. With all the horror adaptations and AI slop being pumped out, I wanted to add something wholesome to the public domain. Link in the description, and enjoy the video.
Come on, Piglet. Oh no!
What was I tell?
Hello, Pooh Bear.
Hello random person, Sab Nino here. If you didn't know, I have a special interest in a particular yellow character. Ever since I was introduced to SpongeBob, I was a fan ever since. However, I had another interest before I was introduced to the most memorable invertebrate. And funny enough, he's yellow and wears red. You read the title of the video, of course I'm talking about Winnie the Pooh. What started off as a book series by A.A. Milnes eventually became a very popular Disney franchise. I'm assuming Winnie the Pooh needs no introduction, and everyone has seen at least one movie, unless you're in China. When I was a young little sapling, I used to be obsessed with the Disney adaptation of Pooh Bear. I had plush toys, books, and many VHS tapes of the silly old bear. Then SpongeBob happened, and I hated it for being quote-unquote babyish. But then I rediscovered the original movie in high school, and I fell in love with it again. It's just a simple, wholesome franchise following cuddly characters doing whatever. So for the longest time, I've wanted to express my love of Winnie via a YouTube video. But I never knew how until I came up with this one. Apparently, Winnie the Pooh has a ton of television shows, and nobody covered them all in one video. F***ing cowards. So I thought, why not cover each one and see if there's any hidden honey pots in the 100-acre wood? The first series on this list is Welcome to Pooh Corner from 1983, back when Disney Channel was called The Disney Channel. It was a live-action, partially educational show where the characters are depicted as guys in suits. Fun fact, the lead designer of these suits is Ken Forsey. Ken Forsey? The reason why I bring this up is because he went from making a creepy-looking bear to a creepy-looking bear. If this iteration of Pooh and Teddy Ruxpin were in a fist fight, I think Pooh would win. By the way, if you want a more in-depth video discussing Welcome to Pooh Corner, I'd highly recommend Defunctland's video on it, along with the rest of his catalog.
Tigger learns how to make spaghetti and force feeds it to his friends until they can't take it anymore. Wholesome children's entertainment.
If I were to describe this show in 2 words, it would be fever dream, because the show stars the iconic Pooh and friends, but the way they're portrayed is off. And I'm not even talking about the creepy costumes, though they aren't helping in that regard. One way that this show feels off is the drastic voice changes of many of the characters. Since in this show, none of the characters have their original voice actors except for Owl, which isn't that bad, since with a franchise as old as Winnie the Pooh, naturally recasts are inevitable. But this is the first instance of the characters being recasted, and some of them work and others are simply a mediocre impression.
I just want everyone to stop, and I get to do this all day long.
Hal Smith voices Pooh Bear this time around, who also voiced Owl in this show and the original movie. Owl's voice is spot on, because why wouldn't he be? But due to him only voicing Pooh in this show and in a couple of shorts, sadly all I can picture is the 6-foot abomination whenever he voices him.
I dropped it on the other side, and it came out on this side.
The portrayals of the characters in this show are close to their personalities, to the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh, but there's certain attributes they add to make them feel different from the rest of the iterations in this video. Some of the characters are portrayed pretty well. Piglet, Eeyore, Tigger, and Owl feel like themselves more often than not. Though Pooh Bear isn't the bear of very little brains in this show. Since the series is educational in nature, they made him slightly smarter, which is fine for this type of show, but it doesn't help him not feeling like himself here, especially with this design. Plus, for some reason, Rabbit is a magician in this show. I feel like the only reason why they did this is because he's a rabbit and they're associated with magic. Oh, and Christopher Robin is only mentioned once in the school bus PSA. but is never seen. But there's a Muppet bus driver, and it makes me very uncomfortable knowing that these stuffed animals are probably bigger than the only human seen with these characters. The only other human is actually the narrator, which is pretty unique for this series since in every piece of Pooh media, the narrator is only heard. So it's nice seeing what he looks like for a change. So the visuals and the characters are a fever dream, but what about the stories? Well, every story goes like this. We're introduced to the topic of the day, they sing the same song a couple of times in the episode with like slight variations to the lyrics, and eventually there is a moral. Then at the end, there's a song and interactive segment with one of the characters. Maybe this is due to my shortening attention span, but these episodes feel very long and boring. Which is odd, cause it does something similar to what the films do. Have the characters talk and do what their hearts desire. But the reason why this show doesn't work as well is because the story doesn't work around the characters. The characters work around the story. And the stories aren't even that interesting to begin with. They more often than not feel like their sole purpose is to explain the story in moral, which is honestly sad. The most well-known episode, for better or worse, is the Too Smarts for Strangers PSA, and you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. The one where you hear Pooh Bear say the word private parts.
Your bathing suit covers your private parts. Some strangers, the bad ones, want to hurt kids. And bears, and even piglets.
Who would want to touch Pooh and piglets? Oh no. Did Christopher Robin go through a horny teenager phase? Oh, thank fuck they're okay. I'll be real, for a first show based on Winnie the Pooh, it did alright. Unfortunately, there's simply not much reason to watch this one when there's more faithful adaptations of Pooh in a television format. However, if you do want to watch it, most of the episodes are on archive, but I highly recommend watching this with a friend. Trust me, it would be much more entertaining than the show itself. But that is no excuse to exclude it from Disney+. Come on, give us Uncanny Pooh Bear in HD. You know what's been missing from the Winnie the Pooh franchise? Politics. Wait, this is interesting, I promise. Around the 1960s, there was a campaign in Disneyland to promote the final two shorts that make up the first movie, The Blustery Day and Tigger 2. One way they promoted this campaign is to broadcast Pooh's election against Rodney the Rotten Wolf, a character made solely for this campaign. Fun fact, the event was recorded in Florida, which wouldn't be out of place nowadays, but was a weird decision at the time given that Disney World wasn't a thing yet. I hate Pooh's design and voice in this so goddamn much. I know the design is based on Disneyland's mascot at the time, so I can give them a little bit of slack, but there is no excuse for this voice.
It really makes me happy to see such a demonstration. It's because of them I'm running for president.
This also proves as to why Pooh doesn't fit the role of a political power. The reasoning for him going along with it is very in line for his character, with Owl saying that he should run for president. Why he didn't just do it is beyond me. He'd have my vote. But a lot of Pooh's promises, although are good for a kid-friendly president, are things I don't think Pooh Bear would give a fuck about. Does Pooh really seem like the person who cares about ice cream prices and recess? Plus, his oath is a bunch of generic be a good kid stuff, like obeying your parents and having good hygiene, which are good morals, but I cannot imagine Pooh saying these things in any form. Okay, maybe in Pooh Corner. The broadcast pretty much amounts to Pooh and Rodney doing their debate, some weird clown segment, monkey, and shoving the Pooh Bear Sears outfit line down our throats. Since this came out prior to Blustery Day and Tigger 2, Piglet and Tigger were never mentioned whatsoever, which is distracting nowadays, but I didn't expect them to know they were planned to appear. Okay, maybe Tigger since he's in the title. Pooh won the election, and would later run against Captain Hook of all people. Sadly, there's no live broadcast of that. This event is one of the weirdest things in Winnie the Pooh history, and even though I'm happy they don't do this anymore, it was a fascinating time capsule. I know this doesn't count as a series, but I felt like if I didn't talk about it here, then I wouldn't have any other opportunity to bring this up. So after whatever the hell Welcome to Pooh Corner was, Disney Channel tried to do something more true to form, with The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, a traditionally animated series starring Christopher Robin and his gang of plush toys, and 3 animals. The series was pretty successful, and is most likely the first thing you think of when you hear Winnie the Pooh series. Plus, if it wasn't for this show, the franchise probably wouldn't be as successful as it is. You can also thank this show for Jim Cummings as Pooh Bear, who is my personal favorite voice actor for the character, though I might be biased due to mainly growing up with his portrayal.
The way to stay the happiest is to let your tongue lickle and keep your tummy tickled.
Speaking of voice cast, unlike Welcome to Pooh Corner, many voice actors from the original movie surprisingly reprised their role in this show, such as Hal Smith as Owl, John Fielder as Piglet, and Paul Winchell as Tigger, who was later replaced by Jim Cummings in Season 4, which is a fitting recast. Peter Cullens is also Eeyore, and the only reason why I bring this up is because he's the voice of Optimus Prime. I never got into the Transformers franchise, but it's so fascinating how one person in one point in time voiced these 2 drastically different characters. Instead of an educational show, New Adventures is more entertainment based. It's much more character focused, and the stories work around the characters instead of against them, which I believe is Winnie the Pooh at its best. All of the characters are true to their forms, and feel very faithful to the original movie, which makes sense since the whole show is named after it. The only real addition is Gopher, who was in the original movie, and makes quite a bit of appearances in this show. I'll be blunt, I never liked Gopher. I feel like he was an unnecessary addition to the franchise that they quickly forgot about. And the fact that he was meant to replace Piglet makes his existence even more insulting. However, he is best handled in this show, and it does try its best to make his inclusion more organic. New Adventures is probably the most zany edition of Winnie the Pooh, relying quite a bit on slapstick comedy and sometimes bizarre premises to make things interesting. Most of the stories are very simple in nature and don't go that bizarre, like the gang trying to cheer up Eeyore, or Owl not remembering how to fly. But some are more out there, like an entire Western episode and one with a village of piglets. Hell, they even explore outside the 100-acre woods sometimes, like going to a theater, a grocery store. There's even a ton of episodes that take place in Christopher Robin's room. Speaking of which, I forgot to mention that this show is more Americanized than the movies, which can be very divisive. Most of it isn't noticeable, but some of the stuff in the shows feel very Western coded, such as the whole Western episode I mentioned earlier. The most noticeable change has to be Christopher Robin's voice, since he doesn't have his British accent in this.
There now, did I get your tail back on properly, Eeyore? I'm gonna take care of the neighbor's dog for the whole day.
Since I watched this show a ton as a kid, in high school I honestly didn't know he had a British accent. I told my mom and she was like, "What the f*** are you talking about? He was always British." Man, do I feel silly. Did anyone else think this too? Comment below. The show also had a few additions to the cast that appeared a few times throughout the show, such as a Heffalump and Woozle villain group, Crows, who have made appearances in a few movies, and Owl's nephew Dexter, who only shows up in one episode, but I wanted to bring him up cause look at him, he's just a copy-paste of Owl. The most impactful addition to the show has to be Kessie the bird, who Rabbit rescues and raises as if she was his own child. It's a really emotional relationship, and I think it made Kessie the best new character as a result. The only downside is that she only has 2 appearances, her debut as a baby, and a reunion episode where she's older. Not sure how I feel about her grown-up design, to be honest. Before I wrap up my thoughts on the show, Simone, the person who I commissioned for the thumbnail and cloud backdrop, brought up something on a live stream that I almost completely glossed over. She told me how she grew up with the movie Pooh's Grand Adventure: The Search for Christopher Robin. Although I haven't grown up with the film personally, I did end up watching it later on as an adult and rewatching it for this video. Simone brought up some really good points for this video, which was honestly really cool because it's rare seeing someone else this invested in the PCU, Pooh's Cinematic Universe. I almost didn't mention it just in case I wanted to do another longer video where I talk about all the movies, but a few thoughts wouldn't hurt. Pooh's Grand Adventure is a film where Pooh and the gang try to search for Christopher Robin, who has been dragged away to the dreaded skull. The best way I can describe this movie is a more cinematic version of New Adventures. It has the same voice cast, except Christopher, who is actually British this time, so if anything, it improves upon it. Same type of humor, same yet slightly upgraded animation, and even the same heart. I say this film is all of New Adventures' best qualities wrapped into one feature film. And although it isn't my favorite movie in the franchise, it's still a good watch and gives something different compared to the other films. Overall, I think the series is a massive improvement from Welcome to Pooh Corner. It does a pretty good job representing the franchise and managed to do its own thing on top of that. It's nice, cozy, and nostalgic to watch for sure. I would definitely recommend it to other Pooh fans.
Hang out with us and head to Hawaii in Lilo & Stitch the series next.
Then catch up with Pooh and Tigger in the new adventures of Winnie the Pooh.
Would it surprise you that there have been a few scrapped Pooh Bear related shows? There's not that many, but I think they're worth small intermissions between some of the shows, starting with... In 1999, Cosgrove Hall was going to make a direct-to-video Winnie the Pooh series done entirely in stop motion. They're the people who did animation for Naughty's Toyland Adventures, along with a ton of other projects. A pilot was made, but it's currently lost media, and the only thing we have as evidence for this show are 2 animation tests and a few progress photos. This show was eventually scrapped due to Disney being satisfied with the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, and continuing the 2D medium instead. However, this would later change with this next show, which takes a similar but different approach to what Cosgrove Hall was going to do.
Hey everyone! Jump into the Book of Pooh online. Play with Pooh and his friends at PlayhouseDisney.com.
The third show Disney's Pooh starred in was 2001's The Book of Pooh, which is the first show to debut on the Playhouse Disney block. Even though New Adventures aired on there as well, this is the first Winnie the Pooh show to debut on it. This show is probably the most visually unique show I have ever seen. Instead of going full stop motion, or having legless puppets like on Sesame Street, Shadow Projects uses full body puppets for all the characters. And I think the medium works perfectly for a show like Winnie the Pooh. Since the characters are mostly stuffed animals, the puppet style works super well since all the characters look soft and cuddly. The 3D backgrounds look a little off sometimes, and some shots look obviously green screened, but I still madly respect them for putting so much effort into the visuals. The Book of Pooh leans a tiny bit more into Welcome to Pooh Corner, where there's a song in each episode and a basic story to go along with it. This sounds like a bad thing, but I think it works a lot better here. First off, the characters aren't out of character, and feel/look like themselves. Second, the song is only played once in each episode, and thirdly, unlike Pooh Corner, the characters feel organically put into these stories instead of the characters just being excuses to explain things. All of Pooh Corner's weaknesses are the Book of Pooh's strength, and as the cool kids say, we love to see it. This is perhaps the most character-focused show out of all of them, and that's saying something since New Adventures was pretty character-focused too. But I think it's even more so here, since there's more room for the characters to breathe and be themselves. Hell, some of their comments to one another can be really funny, and even snarky.
But if I could just...
Remember, Rabbit, relax.
It's just that my garden...
Don't make me pounce, you bunny boy.
But I'd still like to get a few things done. I can't... All right.
I'm afraid we may have created something of a monster, Pooh.
Oh dear, where, Piglet?
I mean, Rabbit is getting a bit too big for his britches, don't you think?
Well, I don't believe he actually wears any, Piglet.
I think we might have to tell Rabbit that we sent the ribbon.
Oh, well, why didn't you just say so? What? And I'm never laughing again. Period. Knock, knock, Tigger. Who's there? Amos. Amos who? A mosquito just bit me. I don't think my laugh is asleep. I think it just left town. Ugh.
Honestly, the character portrayals remind me a lot of the 2011 film Winnie the Pooh. Because in that movie, they shifted the focus from being heartwarming to being more comedic. The Book of Pooh does something similar. It has plenty of wholesome moments, but the focus feels more story and comedy driven. Both Book of Pooh and the 2011 movie impressed me on how they're able to shift the writing style without it feeling off. Well, okay, Owl did feel out of character in the film I mentioned, but that issue isn't present here. Another thing I adore is the music. The series has a requirement of putting a song in each episode, sometimes multiple if it's a special, such as the holiday episodes. Though sometimes they do get very fancy and decide to do a reprise of the song to make it more impactful. This can be a massive risk, and the implementation of it can be super hit or miss depending on the show. The Book of Pooh thankfully does this concept really well. It reminds me a lot of Phineas and Ferb style of music, where they experiment with different song genres to keep things fresh. I wonder if Phineas and Ferb took any inspiration from this. I doubt it, but it is a funny coincidence. Is it weird to hear Pooh singing country, or the gang singing whatever the hell this is?
What is that?
What is it?
What?
What is it?
What is it?
What is it?
What
is it?
The green thing from outer space. It's got no eyes, no ears, no face.
Is it friendly? It might be mean.
And all we know for sure is that it's green.
Seriously, is this rap? Is it sci-fi? I'm not sure. Yeah, but I think not sticking to one genre is the best way to make each song stand out. Though the abundance of auto-tune is very, very distracting.
You'll never really know until you think.
They tried adding an educational aspect to this show by having the narrator talk to one of the characters about a vocabulary word based on the episode. But even though it's fine, it doesn't really add much. Hell contributes so little that they flat out removed the segment altogether on Disney+. Even with this removed, this show absolutely loves spreading book propaganda, especially when Owl's in an episode. He's always going on and on about how a book is a great way to gain information and typically uses books to solve the problem in the episode, or in some cases start them. Like the time he taught Eeyore to become a party animal.
You party animal, you. Hey, how's it going? Good to see you. Good to see you.
Where was he in Barnyard? I'm not surprised that a show called The Book of Pooh is pro-reading. Sometimes it just feels like this show is going, read a book, you worthless peasant! At this point in this massive video, I started to notice what plots they reuse from show to show. And this one in particular has borrowed some plots from Pooh Corner and New Adventures, such as characters switching personalities, a character living with another character, a character refusing to eat because they're a picky bitch, Mood, Piglet trying to share his poetry, and even making another Western story. Though, honestly, I like this show's take on it much better. For some reason, the franchise loves the idea of Tigger and Piglet switching places, because it's in this show, and even Winnie the Pooh, a very merry Pooh year. And spoiler alert, it won't be the last. Another thing I want to bring up is that Kessie is a regular character in this. Continuity-wise, it's kind of weird, since in New Adventures, Kessie left until she was older, but this implies that she was always here? I don't want to think about it too hard, especially since another show hurts my head more than this one does in terms of continuity. But she's a nice addition. She isn't my favorite character in the show, but I enjoy her inclusion. Weirdly enough, she appeared in the show before even Kanga and Roo, who don't appear until season 2. Also, Christopher barely shows up in the show, and when he does, his face is covered. He doesn't have a British accent here either. He only made one appearance in the bulk of episodes I've watched, with him mostly being mentioned outside of the theme song. But he was in a straight-to-video movie called Stories from the Heart. Since I've seen the whole thing, I might as well share a few aspects of this compilation that I thought were interesting enough to bring up. First off, Kessie was trying to help Rabbit Garden, but but didn't know how. But since he was her guardian in the last show, you'd think she'd know this like the back of her wing. Also, in Tigger's story, he mentioned that he had a stripedy nursemaid?
It was just something my good old stripedy nursemaid used to do.
I tried listening to this part many times and I still can't make out what he's saying. But it stuck out to me because for decades he sang about how he is the only one. And Disney even made an entire movie proving that he doesn't have a biological family. Yet this implies that there's more than one Tigger. Oh, and this story has the most passive-aggressive lullaby song I have ever heard.
Go to sleep before you make us cranky. Do it soon or else we'll all go crazy.
Lastly, when the gang was cleaning up Christopher's room before his arrival, Pooh put away another plush bear. Chris has been cheating on him with another bear, and it went under his radar! And those were my last minute thoughts on the VHS tape that I might or might not have owned. Also, side tangent, but one episode actually scared me when I first watched it. There was an episode where characters were discussing dinosaurs, and the song in the episode was a fantasy sequence of the characters dressing up as dinosaurs. For some reason, this freaked me out, and I closed my eyes through most of it. I would have included it in my trauma video, but that was Nick trauma and not Disney trauma. And unfortunately, I don't have as many Disney-related trauma stories, so I wanted to share this one on here. Honestly, I enjoyed this show quite a bit as well. I might even prefer it over New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. It just feels more like Winnie the Pooh to me, and has a nice cozy vibe to it. It's probably not for everyone, but I'd honestly recommend the Book of Pooh as well. This detour will be brief, but I feel like this was still worth mentioning due to a couple of commenters bringing this up. Around 2011, there was a mini-series that would air during commercials titled The Mini Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which are clips from the movie redone by the voice cast of the 2011 movie, with Travis Oates' Piglet, and my personal favorite, Tom Kenny as Rabbit.
All right now the first stick to pass all the way under the bridge wins.
Can you see yours, Boo? No.
The original voice actor behind Piglet, and Ken Sampson, who voiced Rabbit for the longest time, have passed away at this point. So these two ended up filling for those two afterwards. Ken's last show was Tigger and Pooh, and John's final appearance was in the Book of Pooh. Travis's Piglet took some getting used to, especially when watching my friends Tigger and Pooh. But once the 2011 movie came around, I think he started doing a great job. Tom Kenny didn't get to voice Rabbit that much, but since SpongeBob is one of my favorite characters of all time, I feel like I am legally required to love this interpretation of Rabbit. Honestly, this detour was just an excuse to discuss the voice switch, since I forgot to bring it up when talking about the next show. Because this show isn't that interesting to talk about. It's just a clip show overall, and you get more enjoyment watching the movies in full than these bite-sized pieces. But if I saw these on Disney Channel nowadays, I wouldn't complain. Oh, there's also a show about this one guy reading stories that was also in between Disney Channel commercials. I forgot to write this in, so I'm just saying it here. The Book of Pooh led to a trend going forward with the rest of the shows, since once it aired, Winnie the Pooh started to aim its animated lineup towards a preschool audience. Sure, Welcome to Pooh Corner existed prior to this, and New Adventures' prime demographic was kids, but the shows coming up feel more like the focus was less on universal appeal and instead aimed strictly at a young demographic, which isn't super terrible, since even earlier on, Winnie the Pooh had specials and games with that said demographic in mind. Plus, there's already a lot of Winnie the Pooh stuff with all audiences in mind, like with the spin-off movies. Okay, enough build-up, let's discuss 2007's My Friend Tigger and Pooh, the first Winnie the Pooh series to be fully animated in CGI, which unfortunately hasn't aged the greatest looking back, but they still translated the characters decently well. Also, Tigger Fortnite dances.
You do a rain dance when you want rain, so you do a grow dance when you want something to grow. go!
Since Disney is partnering with Fortnite, the fact that this being in it is a real possibility is scary to think about. This show shook up the Pooh formula in a number of ways. First off, instead of Christopher Robin, we have Darby and her dog Buster. Then we have the biggest change of turning her, Tigger, and Pooh into super sleuths, who exist to solve simple mysteries around the 100-acre wood, which mostly involves helping out a character. So one of my closest friends and Simone brought this up to me, so I feel like it was important to bring it up here. But the title, My Friends Tigger and Pooh, is an insult! I get it, Tigger and Pooh hang out with Darby the most due to being super sleuths, but look at this poster! Piglet's right here, and you're just gonna diss him like that? What about Eeyore and Rabbit? Why is this title picking favorites? The show's format is similar to stuff like Mickey Mouse Clubhouse or Blue's Clues, but what's odd is that they don't go all out with it. Normally with these types of shows, every character interacts with the viewer and talks directly to them. Well here, Darby is the only one who does this. And when she does, it's normally not that often, though they do have Darby talk to the viewers at the end credits and play a game with reused animation, typically from the episode. The only instance where somebody else other than Darby talks to the audience is when the 100-acre wood threw a surprise party, cause they don't want a bunch of 3-year-olds shouting at Darby about the surprise. There's also a repeating song in each episode. For instance, when Winnie or another character says the iconic phrase, think, 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 they always have a song to accompany it. Then later on in around season 2, I believe, they introduced a song called Who, What, When, Where, Why, or How. But in the episodes I've seen, they only played one of these two songs. There wasn't an instance where they played both of them, and unless it's for a quick gag, they normally don't play it more than once. When I was first watching this show, I was honestly really upset with the format change. It felt like they were fixing something that isn't broken by adding an artificial new element to the show. In some regard, I do believe that the new elements take away from the experience that the other shows had, and due to this, it can get awfully repetitive to rewatch. The same thing can be said about Welcome to Pooh Corner and the Book of Pooh, but with those, it's either not as long or easily skippable. While here, the repeating elements, like the songs and the Super Sleuth Oath, happen each episode, and even though they're short, it did get on my nerves a bit when binge watching the show. When talking about new adventures, I said it was pretty zany. It might even be the zaniest show out of all of them. With that being said, the stories in Tigger and Pooh can get pretty nuts. Almost to the point where they don't feel like Pooh Bear stories anymore. Most of them are very down to earth, and most mystical elements are a figment of the character's imagination. But every now and again, they have a premise that's batshit insane, such as Darby becoming a giant. The movie trilogy is probably the best example of stories that feel too out there for Winnie the Pooh, such as the gang meeting Santa in the holiday movie, and one where a meteor hits Rabbit's garden, giving the super sleuths superpowers. Oh, and the Christmas movie proves my point as to why My Friends Tigger and Pooh is an insulting title. Because when heading to the North Pole, Darby sings a song about how all of them are going to the North Pole, and she only brings up her, Tigger, and Pooh, when everyone else is joining them on the adventure. Darby, you are a f***ing narcissist. However, other than the negatives that I just mentioned, it's hard to say that this doesn't feel like Winnie the Pooh. The characters still feel like themselves and work off of this new premise just fine. They even added quite a bit of new characters in the mix as well. The most noticeable one is definitely Darby and Buster, since she isn't a one-off character. If anything, she's probably more of a main character than Pooh Bear himself. She's basically a tomboy type character and is the main guardian of Pooh and his friends while Christopher Robin is a school. Though it's never revealed what Darby's relationship with Christopher is. Is she his friend, his younger sister, even a cousin? Christopher only makes 2 appearances in the entire show, and this fact is never explained. I think there's a lot of untapped potential with Darby that unfortunately wasn't explored in this show. Cause the whole time watching this series, I kept thinking to myself, how did Darby meet Christopher? How was she introduced to Pooh and friends? What made Chris patch Detours to Darby when he's away? There wasn't any form of origin stories in the episodes I've watched, and when I look up Darby origin story, nothing pops up. So if there's any lore relating to Darby that you guys know that I don't, please comment below, because I am very curious. As is, she's fine. She never got on my nerves and bounced off the rest of the characters pretty organically, so her inclusion in the show isn't bothersome at all. Also, Buster is just a dog. Not much to say on him other than that he's voiced by D. Bradley Baker. The main reason why I bring this up is because the only dog I know that he plays is Happy from the Mighty Bee, and hearing his performance on both Happy and Buster was legit impressive, since they don't sound like the same dog. They have different inflections, and it's very cool to see D. Bradley Baker perform two different dogs with two different voices. Speaking of voice acting, Darby's VA, Chloe Grace Moretz, later voiced Nimona. I watched the film when Netflix uploaded it to YouTube, and it's an amazing film and I encourage everyone to watch it. Chloe's performance as Nimona was so good that I flat out forgot throughout most of the viewing that she voiced Darbuddy. Also, Darby has a different voice in the UK. I swear the US has some sort of stigma with British accents. But if Peppa and Bluey are anything to go by, times have changed for the better.
Yeah, it's getting kind of late. Well, we've talked to a lot of our friends, and nobody's seen Eeyore's tail.
They also introduced a few minor characters, such as Porcupine, Turtle, Beaver, and Woodpecker. Porcupine is probably my favorite new character, since she fits in with the original character super well. Turtle has some interesting episodes, and his western vibe gives him a bit of a charm. Beaver honestly feels like they wanted a Gopher type character, but didn't want to include Gopher himself. Is Gopher the Scrappy-Doo of the Winnie the Pooh franchise? Is there a non-spoken rule to never include him? Woodpecker is just there, I guess. I don't love him or hate him. He's just the one that talks fast. My least favorite addition in the lineup has to be Skunk. Don't get me wrong, he's a sweet character and has a charm to him. I just hate his debut episode, because the Super Sleuths are trying to help him become stinky, which leads to a ton of gross out, which is something I wish the PCU, Pooh Cinematic Universe, didn't touch with a 10-foot pole. His second major appearance is Beaver being racist against him, which is better solely for that sentence I just said. There's also the Possum Twins, they're just there. They also met a reindeer in the Christmas movie that shows up from time to time. They also bring back Lumpy from Pooh's Heffalump movie. I loved Lumpy in that movie, I love him in this show, and I love his relationship with Roo. I am so glad the franchise eventually gave Roo a friend to play with around his age other than Dexter. Speaking of Dexter, Owl flat out doesn't make an appearance in this entire show. I'm a little upset that they introduced so many new characters to make the woods feel alive, but they left him out. Hashtag justice for Owl. A character I almost forgot to include is Small. He's just a bug. Maybe it would have been better if I just left him out. I almost forgot to include this, but there's some reused episode ideas in this series, just like with the Book of Pooh. For instance, we have another character not eating due to being a picky bitch story, with Beaver being the bitch this time. We have the Tigger and Pigger switcheroo, which is the second time they've done this personality swap between Tigger and Piglet in this marathon, and the fourth time overall since Pooh Corner and New Adventures also had a switching places episode. The Book of Pooh also had an episode where Tigger and Rabbit divided the woods, and Tigger and Pooh and the Musical 2 is literally just a movie-length version of said episode. I can't say I fully enjoy this show, but it's hard to hate something this harmless. This show simply isn't made with adults in mind, and that's okay. It's honestly a fine show for kids, but for anyone older, it's simply just average. After My Friend Tigger and Pooh ended in 2010, we were actually deprived from Winnie the Pooh content for a while. We had merchandise, of course, and cameos in other shows like Doc McStuffins, but there wasn't that much media starring the silly old bear. There was 2011's Winnie the Pooh, but not only did it bomb at the box office, but it ended up murdering 2D animation in theaters as a whole. Then in 2018, they tried again with Christopher Robin, but even that wasn't enough to regain interest in the franchise again. We legit didn't get another animated series for 14 years, an entire decade. However, that doesn't mean there was never any attempt to bring Pooh Bear back to the small screen, as we'll get into with this last Detour. In 2014, Cartoon Saloon made a pilot for a scrapped cartoon titled The World According to Winnie the Pooh. For years, said pilot was lost media, but sometime in 2023, it was uploaded online. The story of said pilot is Pooh, Piglet, Pilot and Tigger just figuring out what a smartphone is. Hijinks ensue. So this would have been the first iteration of the franchise to take place in the modern day. There's actually quite a bit of risks taken with this pilot that I honestly respect. First off, the animation is really cute and simple. It does its own thing while respecting what makes the characters iconic. Also, every character is played by a British actor. Although it does take some getting used to hear someone other than Jim Cummings play Pooh Bear, everyone was super well casted, and makes perfect sense for Winnie the Pooh since it is a British property.
Tigger, we think he might be lost.
And we're going to help him find his mum.
Well, clearly, he's not lost. He's simply
leaving.
Plus, it would have been a good apology for all the times they tried making Pooh un-British. The detail that caught my attention is how at the end of the pilot, it's revealed that Pooh and the gang aren't alive, and everything that happened was simply in Christopher Robin's imagination. Sure, this was always implied in previous iterations. For instance, in the New Adventures, Christopher's mom never addresses Pooh and friends, though in some projects they simply make them real like in Christopher Robin. But none of the previous iterations were this blunt with that fact, so it's fascinating to see them take that approach. I'll be completely blunt. We were robbed. This show looked like it could have been a great new take on Winnie the Pooh, and I am massively disappointed that Disney didn't pick this up.
Hiya, friend! Let's go play!
2023's Playdate with Winnie the Pooh is a CG musical short series animated by Oddbot, starring the 100 Acre Wood Gang as children and having a playdate each episode. However, we also have a spin-off series called Me and Winnie the Pooh, which has the characters interact with the viewers almost like a vlog. I decided to combine these two shows since they take place in the same continuity, plus the vlog shorts provide some nice bonuses that I think could help better understand his interpretation of Winnie the Pooh. Fun fact, I met Jim Cummings at a Comic-Con with my best friend, and I had him sign the thumbnail I commissioned Simone. He recognized Tigger and Pooh first, and New Adventures, of course. Though when he saw this show, his response was, I don't know how to feel about this. Although a funny reaction, all of my thoughts are my own. But I wanted to share this cause he literally voices the character this video series is based on. How could I not? Out of all the series on this list, this one is simply the most drastic reimagining of Winnie the Pooh. Sure, my friends Tigger and Pooh took quite a bit of risks, but it's still heavily inspired by the movie/series prior to it. These shows full-blown reboot Pooh and the gang for a fresh new audience, which is certainly fascinating to see after the designs being pretty stagnant for so long. Each show is very simple in nature, which honestly makes me super happy, since even though they've changed so much, that proves to me that they at least understand what makes Pooh work in the first place. It's simply two characters, sometimes three, playing a simple game or activity, running into a hurdle, and figuring out a way to deal with said hurdle. For a 2-minute story, most of them work fine. Sometimes it feels like they run out of time, but I think this format works pretty well. There's also a song in each episode, and I'll be real, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Like some songs feel organically included into the short, while other times it feels like it simply exists due to it being a requirement. The songs themselves are also fine. I'm not jamming out to them when working on videos, but they're fine little ditties and mostly serve the story. Also, is it me, or does Get Your Bounces Out sound very similar to Lollipop from Bluey?
Wiggle, wiggle, shake, shake, Tigger hop. I use my rubber bottoms and my springy top.
Now that I hear it, I cannot unhear it. As I stated earlier, the characters are kids in the show. The more I think about it, the more my head hurts. First off, this implies that stuffed animals age. It makes sense for Rabbit to be a kid since he's a real rabbit, but everyone else is a plush toy. So how does that work? Wait, are they even plush toys? Cause Pooh is frequently seen playing with stuffies in these shorts. Plus, when I exposed Simone to the designs, she brought up that there's no stitching on these characters. And Pooh and Piglet even have nostrils. If they aren't plush toys, then does that mean Eeyore has a nail stabbing his ass?
I have a nail in my anus.
What happened to Christopher Robin? Is this a prequel to them meeting him? Also, Roo isn't in the show, but Kanga is, so that implies that stuffed animals can give birth in this universe? Plus, why do their houses look more extravagant than they do when they're adults? I'll get to that last point in a bit. To be honest, this is not a problem with the show. It's probably its own thing with its own set of rules. So if you want to watch this show for your sanity, don't think about the canon too hard. Trust me. The characters remain pretty faithful to their original personalities. Some things can be off about them, but they still feel like the characters we all know and love. Pooh Bear himself is more of a Welcome to Pooh Corner approach, where instead of being a bear of very little brains, he often introduces the thing him and the other character is playing. Even though it's odd thinking about how child Pooh is smarter than adult Pooh, I think it works better than in Pooh Corner. Sure, it's a similar issue where Pooh simply serves to educate on the topic at hand, but due to the shorter runtime, it isn't as distracting. To add on to this, sometimes the other characters introduce the activity instead, and Pooh is the one figuring it out, which prevents it from being completely formulaic. Oh, and one thing I thought was noteworthy is that he writes poetry in an episode, which I thought was an odd decision, since in both New Adventures and Book of Pooh, Piglet is the character who writes poetry. Speaking of Piglet, he's still the same timid self, though in Me and Winnie the Pooh, they actually try to flesh him out a little. In Meet Piglet, he shows an interest in playing with building blocks and pretending he's a superhero, which I say are pretty cute additions to this character, even though they haven't come into play in any of the Playdate episodes so far. He also has insomnia. Mood. Tigger legit hasn't changed at all. Other than him being younger, he's pretty much just Tigger through and through. The one touch I appreciate with him in particular, along with the show as a whole, is how he encourages calming techniques and breathing exercises. It's something a lot of kid shows are doing these days, and I love that. Eeyore is slightly happier in the series opposed to the other shows, but he still is depressing as always. Plus it makes sense since those symptoms often worsen as you get older. I know from experience. Eeyore's probably my favorite character so far. He is so cute in this show, and Meet Eeyore makes me love him even more. He might even be autism coded. In the already mentioned Me and Winnie the Pooh short, Meet Eeyore, we learn a little bit more about what he's into. The two things that caught my attention is how he spins in a tire swing, which could serve as a form of stimming, and he enjoys playing with dinosaurs, which is a common special interest in the community. Or maybe I'm looking way too deep into a preschool show about a yellow stuffed bear. I at least thought it would be interesting to bring up as a fellow person on the autism spectrum. The last thing I want to bring up about Eeyore is something I can't wrap my head around. So as an adult, Eeyore's house is made out of sticks. But in this show, he has a full-blown house, yet he still feels the need to build a house made out of sticks. I thought this was simply him doing DIY, until Meet Eeyore flat out has him say, "This is my house," as the camera pans to not his house, but only the sticks. Why do I get the feeling this will never be explained? Despite Kanga not being a mother anymore, a lot of her nurturing qualities still remain here. She just has more spunk and does tons of DIY to boot. Interesting direction, given that Eeyore is typically the artsy one. But with Eeyore's painting and Piglet's block building, I suppose everyone in the show is at least a little crafty. Lastly, we have Rabbit, who doesn't have much in terms of personality. Her bossy demeanor from other shows is gone, and although some attributes stays the same, like her liking instructions, she doesn't leave much of an impression to me. Yes, you heard me right. Rabbit is a girl in the show, which means Rabbit is a trans male. This confirms it. You can't prove me otherwise. Rabbit is a trans icon. Side tangent, but I find it very interesting how just about every series on this list has an episode about trying new foods. In Pooh Corner, it was Tigger. In the Book of Pooh, it was Pooh. In Tigger and Pooh, it was Beaver. And here, it's Piglet. These are all the characters showcased by far. However, in the first episode of Me and Winnie the Pooh, Pooh flat out name drops a character.
I have a lot of friends who live nearby, like Piglet, Tigger, Kanga, Bee,
Who the fuck is Bee? During production of this massive video, Bee didn't make a single physical appearance, nor was her design leaked on social media like some of the other characters. And they practically kept it that way until February of 2024. To put this into perspective, they established her as a character, but hid her from us until 7 months later. Our first glimpse of her was in a theme song music video, but Bee in the Pillow Fort was her actual debut. She's basically a beaver who does construction, so we're still continuing the trend of replacing Gopher with beavers. Yep, he's definitely the franchise's Scrappy-Doo. She also appears in Bee Kanga and the Blank Book, but given the title of the episode, that's a no-brainer. Not much to say on her second appearance, cause Pooh and Bee roleplay in the episode, so it's not like we learn anything new about her. Though I will say, this episode utilizes this song in the short gimmick the best. I was originally going to skip this part, but one issue I have with this iteration of the characters are the catchphrases.
I got a boo-boo. And since I'm Winnie the Pooh, I've got a Winnie the Pooh-boo!
For instance, Pooh obsessively says happy honeypots, and each time he says it, it feels unnatural. Plus in Meet Rabbit, they were trying to figure out a catchphrase for her, and ended up going with none of them. Thankfully, they have tried using some of the older catchphrases, such as Pooh's oh bother and Piglet's oh dear, but sadly, even those felt forced, especially the Piglet one. Oh, and visually, the show looks great. It's very bright and colorful, and a huge upgrade from my friends Tigger and Pooh. I also love the choppy frame rate they add to the animation, though what makes me wish they tried stylizing the show even further. Maybe a budget version of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Being Winnie the Pooh has a slight budget decrease, but it still looks decent. The designs are cute as well. Pretty different, but most of the characters remain pretty faithful to their original designs, but add their own spin on it. Though I will say it was a pretty ballsy move to give Winnie whites in his eyes after Pooh Corner, so I talked quite a bit about this show, simply because it's the one that's the most fresh in my mind right now. But is it any good? Well, it's cute, it's pretty, it's fine for kids. It's not how I'd reboot Winnie the Pooh, but I'm glad the next generation has some interpretation of Winnie the Pooh that they can call their own. So that was my review of each television series based on Disney's Winnie the Pooh. Overall, it had a bunch of twists and turns, but when it lands, it does a pretty good job doing so. Even when the show isn't as good, at least it's memorable and tries something creative with the property. I'm glad I ended up growing up with most of these shows during my childhood, even if I wasn't that into the series when I turned 5. Let's do a quick ranking of each show, shall we? Number 5 is Welcome to Pooh Corner. Number 4 is My Friends Tigger and Pooh. Number 3 is Playdate with / Me and Winnie the Pooh. Number 2 is The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. And number 1, The Book of Pooh. To be honest, I'm kinda surprised The Book of Pooh is number 1, since New Adventures is the one I grew up with the most and is what everybody thinks of. However, I simply think The Book of Pooh does a better job of representing Winnie the Pooh and its simplicity, but I would still highly recommend those two shows in particular. Maybe even Playdate with Winnie the Pooh if that sounds up your alley. So which show did you grow up with? Do you have a favorite one out of the 6 I've mentioned? What other Pooh Bear related media did you grow up with? Comment below. Before the video ends, I want to give a special shout out to Simone for the thumbnail art, cloud backdrop, and for helping me research while working on the commission, Jim Cummings for signing said thumbnail, and genuinely being so nice to me at the Comic-Con. Finally, a special thank you for everyone who supported me on this project through all this time. Big videos aren't my best strong suit, and this entire series was written during the biggest transition period of my life. So whether you're a longtime subscriber or simply watched for this series, I appreciate every single one of you. And as always, it's all Sab from here.